Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, the creator and host of the award-winning podcast that you're listening to right now. Thank you so much, called Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. It is a daily podcast, 365 days a year, and each day we talk to an author about all of the things related to their career, their book, their life, and more in 30 minutes or less, because who has time? I am now an author myself, although I wasn't when I started this podcast, and you can get my new memoir, Bookends, a memoir of love, loss, and literature, wherever books are sold starting July 1st, and my children's book, Princess Charming. You can learn more about me at zibbyowens.com, but really you're here to learn more about the authors, and that is what we're going to do. Also, be sure to check out all the other podcasts in the Zcast Podcast Network. You can learn more at zcastnetwork.com and definitely check out those shows as well. Today's episode is with bestselling author Dani Shapiro. Dani has been one of my favorite authors of all time since I read her memoir, Slow Motion, decades ago, and have been following her career ever since. This was a recording of the live Streicker Center event we did together for 500 plus people in real time, and I hope you enjoy it. Dani Shapiro is the author of 11 books and the host and creator of the hit podcast Family Secrets. Her most recent novel, Signal Fires, was named a Best Book of 2022 by Time Magazine, Washington Post, Amazon, and others, and it is a national bestseller. Her most recent memoir, Inheritance, was an instant New York Times bestseller and named a Best Book of 2019 by Elle, Vanity Fair, Wired, and Real Simple. Dani's work has been published in 14 languages, and she's currently developing Signal Fires for its television adaptation. Dani's book on the process and craft of writing, Still Writing, is being reissued on the occasion of its 10th anniversary in 2023. She occasionally teaches workshops and retreats and is the co-founder of the Sirenland Writers Conference in Positano, Italy. Enjoy. Hi, Dani. How are you?
Zibby, doing well. How are you?
I'm great. This is so fun. As you know, you have been like my favorite author forever and ever. And I should have pulled out, I have all your original copies of like Slow Motion and all the other ones behind me. But anyway, it's so nice to be talking to you again today as a lifetime fan.
Both of us in our studies.
Signal Fires. Oh my gosh. So beautiful. As you saw, I just recommended on Good Morning America, but it didn't need that. It's already just so, everybody who's read it is like, oh my gosh, have you read Signal Fires? It's the best book I've read in so long. It's such a great novel. And I totally agree. It's just wonderful. So, and I didn't realize because originally I had the galley, but that on the hardcover, you even have this little fingerprint and cutout of the tree situation here as well.
I know. That was such a beautiful detail. I mean, Knopf, my publisher, did such a gorgeous job with this book, and just what it looks like is I think what it feels like, or at least that's what I hope, because in my computer when I was writing it and it didn't have a title yet, my title for it actually still is in my files, magic novel, just magic novel. I didn't have a title until I finished it, and I think that design really captures some of that.
Oh, totally. Dani, for those who have not read Signal Fires yet, would you mind giving the quick synopsis?
Sure. So the way that I think of Signal Fires is that it revolves around this constellation of characters. There are 7 main characters that are comprised of 2 families, the Wilfs and the Schenkmans. And the Wilfs and the Schenkmans live in a fictional town called Avalon. That is something like if Dobbs Ferry met Westport, like early Westport. That's how I think of Avalon. The Wilfs first moved there in 1970. And the Schenkmans don't move there until just before New Year's of 1999. But these families end up very powerfully connected to each other, not simply because they live on the same street, Division Street, but because there are these kind of complex connections between them over the span of their lifetime. So the novel takes place over the course of 50 years, but it's not chronological. It moves in and around time. And I think that the beating heart of the book for me is a young boy. He's a young boy when we meet him. He's 11, named Waldo Schenkman, who really is the one who sees everything and connects everything, both in this neighborhood and in terms of the history of what happened on this street in this town. A tragic accident does start the book out, but I'm really trying to not describe it that way, because the book is not about a tragic accident. It's about the aftermath. And the thing about, I mean, all of life is an aftermath in a way. And I was really interested in exploring what these characters, how the impact of both having had something really difficult happen and then the choice to keep that a secret, how that was going to impact them over the course of decades and decades in their lives.
I feel like the book has an accident, but it's about the meaning of life and the meaning of family, right? I mean, it's about like everything from the trees, the matter around us, to the stars above, to the people you love. I mean, it is the most, I mean, it's about everything in a way, but to tell the everything, you have to go really specific. So I feel like that's what you did as a point of reference in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I started the book a long time ago and sort of lost my way, which we can talk about if that's of interest. But the thing for me is that when I returned to it, which is not something I ever thought I was going to do, I never thought I was going to return to that manuscript. I thought I had just lost it. It was in the early days of the pandemic. And one of the many things swirling around my head and my heart in those early days of the pandemic, I think this is true for so many of us, was the deep understanding of how connected we all are, the deep understanding of just the interdependence and interconnectivity of, what it is to be a human being on the planet. And I wanted, the book was already about that, but it sort of went into warp speed of really being about the ways in which we rely on one another, both consciously and sometimes without ever knowing why. And I was so interested in exploring that in the ways that our lives can glance up against each other with perfect strangers. I mean, and yet why sometimes do we meet someone and think, I know you. You are so familiar to me. And that sense of deep and powerful connection. And I wanted to explore that. So there are people who are connected to each other in this book because they are family, because they've grown up together, because they're related to each other. But there also are people who are connected in much more mysterious ways that become clear over the course of the book.
Love it. I feel like this is your whole soulful spiritual thing at play. Yes. And when I saw you at McNally Jackson with Amor Tolls, and you talked about how you had it in the drawer and you found it and said, well, what's this kid up to? What would he be up to now if we fast forwarded him in time to today? So yes, talk about that. I found that fascinating.
Well, I loved that realization, because don't we all want to do that in some way? I mean, I know I do. I just like a glimpse. Can I just see what, when I first started Signal Fires, the magic novel, my son was around Waldo's age. He was 10, 11 years old. And I could imagine little sort of glimmers of who he might become. I mean, Waldo, not my son.
Yeah.
But I was very focused on his life as an 11-year-old boy. I was just in love with this character. And when I sort of lost my way in those pages, those initial pages, it was because I was telling the story backward in time, and I was very committed to that structure, and the structure wasn't working, but I was just hell-bent on making it work and having it conform to my will. And it doesn't work that way when you're writing a novel. And so when I returned to it and I reread those pages, and I had the thought, now it's 2020. Who would that 11-year-old boy be? Oh, he'd be a college student, probably. He was a special, brilliant child. If he wasn't sort of broken by life, he would end up being this kind of really remarkable young adult, which is what I wanted for him and what happened. And this would be the beginning of the pandemic. Where would he be? Would he be back at home in his childhood room? What would have happened to his parents? Another character in the novel is named Theo Wilf, and he is a chef. And when we meet him in 1999 and in 2010, in sections that I had already written, he is actually becoming a well-known chef with a tiny little gem of a restaurant in Brooklyn. And I thought, well, who would Theo be in 2020? right in the first wave of COVID hitting New York City, what would he be doing? I mean, food is love for him. How would he be navigating the pandemic? And so it just really opened up in my mind. And I thought, instead of telling this story in a linear way, and instead of telling the story backward, which didn't work, I can really unplug time, upend time, and tell the story in all of these different layers of time with these 7 characters and these key moments in our lives. I mean, not every year, not every day, not every month, not even every decade is necessarily the most profound, but we know the moments that are. And I wanted to explore those moments, but as you said, Zibby, in a very detailed, specific, very grounded way, for each of the characters.
So it's easy to say that theoretically. I'm going to play with time. I'm going to mix it up. But you have so many pages of stories and scenes and material and characters. How did you do that? Did you print it out and put it on the floor and rearrange? Did you just cut and paste? How did you execute that vision?
It's a great question. I mean, I think in the 15 years between when I started this novel and when I returned to it, I learned a lot in my nonfiction writing, in my memoir writing, about how to tell a story in a more kaleidoscopic way. I mean, my memoir, Hourglass, begins and ends in the same place. I mean, I was very fond of saying when that book came out, there is no plot. My publisher wasn't so happy with me probably, but there wasn't a plot in the traditional sense of, is plot what keeps us turning the pages? In some books, yes. In mysteries, yes. I have become increasingly interested, both as a writer and a reader over these years, in the way that we experience time. And, we're always bringing our pasts along with us. We are always every age we've ever been in some way. And a smell or a sight or a sound or a moment or an event can be like a portal to, like a game of chutes and ladders is the way that I always think of it, is like you're kind of moving along. And, oh, well, actually, you're back to square one, or you're back to that memory or that moment. Our memories are not chronological. And when we think about our future, we don't know what will happen, but we also have fantasies or dreams or fears or anxieties. All of that is always at play. So we're kind of carrying our futures and our pasts alongside us all the time. And I wanted to create that on the page. So no, I did not cut and paste. I did not spread it all over my office floor. Although in the case of others of my books, I've much more had to identify the pattern. In this case, and it was really just this really profound experience, those 100 pages that I had written 15 years ago, they remained intact. They were like in a time capsule. They were like an insect trapped in amber. They already existed really as they were. And when I went back into the book with the knowledge of I'm going to add 2020 to this mix, suddenly I realized that the events that begin to take place on this one night in 2010, well, we can come back to that. We can move forward, we can move backward. And as long as the reader is with me, as long as I've created, the way that I think of them is not a particularly literary term, but it's like lily pads, like we'll jump from one lily pad to another if the author has given us the faith and the confidence and the trust that she knows what she's doing and is going to be able to sort of guide the story, and create the story. So when I returned to the book, I actually wrote what is now the very, very opening, that those few pages of the accident, of the tragedy that happens, that takes place on a night in 1985. I wrote them, but they had been like, somebody recently wrote something online about that opening, page and very admiringly, which was lovely, and like asked me how long it took or something like that. And I said, 15 years. That opening sentence took me 15 years to write. I mean, it was sort of building in me somewhere, even though I never thought I would return to it. So that's how really it just, from then on, I understood the way that I wanted time to move, and I wanted these characters to be carrying along their pasts and also inhabiting their futures as we were reading about them in whatever slice of life they were in.
I remember taking a writing class at one point, and it was like we were all explaining things so much. And I remember the teacher saying something like, don't underestimate the reader. The reader can pick things up so quickly and figure things out. And I feel like you've given so much respect to the reader here to be like, I'm in it. I get it. And I can follow you wherever you go. But it's really masterful to pull it off. I mean, it might sound simple, but it is not. So anyway, that was great. And interestingly, you're talking about memory, right? And all of how our past experiences build into who we are at a certain time and going down these rabbit holes, if you will. But yet Mimi is struggling so much with even being in the here and now as her memories all slip. And so you have to inhabit her character and try to portray a world where everything is like the ultimate time mashup is sort of how it is at the end. Talk about writing that.
Yeah, there were two particular points of view that I was sort of on the edge of my seat as I was writing them, because I thought, can I do this? Is it doable, and is it doable by me? And one of them was Mimi. Mimi Wilf is the mother of this family, the Wilfs. And when we first meet her, she's younger, but when we meet her again, we really sort of enter her consciousness. She's in the throes of Alzheimer's. And, I knew something about that. I'd had a front row seat to my beloved mother-in-law's decline. And I certainly was never sitting with her and thinking I would ever write a character like that. I never thought about it. But when Mimi's mind started slipping away, one of the things I thought about was that she no longer recognizes people, and she doesn't really know where she is. She's kind of unstuck in time herself, but she does know who she loves. She experiences love. She might not be able to recognize her grandchild or her child, but she knows that this is someone that she loves. And in a way, what she's trying to do is get home to them. And so with that understanding, and also the unpinning of time, so that she is really at every age she's ever been in her mind. And, the ways in which, and I don't know that that's what it's like, but I imagine that might be what it's like. And so much of writing a novel is an act of the empathic imagination or compassion. And one thing that really felt new for me in Signal Fires is that I had like endless stores of compassion for all of my characters. And in other fiction of mine, there's tended to be, there are difficult characters in Signal Fires, but somehow the narrative voice allows for us to really understand these people and to feel for them. And I think I've always felt for all of my characters, but I'm not sure I had quite those stores of empathy. It's as if the narrative voice of the novel itself is like a maternal voice. That's holding all of these characters, can't intervene, can't fix things, can't make their lives perfect. Sometimes stands back and goes, "Oh no, I wish you wouldn't do that," but still has such love for them. So I think that's how I approached Mimi in that way. And then the other character where I was really on the edge of my seat writing there's a scene, and I don't want to give too much away, but there's a scene where I'm basically writing in a newborn's point of view for just a couple of pages. It couldn't go on very long. But I thought, can I do this? It's exciting for me as a writer to access something that is both universal, familiar, and that isn't something that I have direct conscious experience of.
It's almost like a maypole. You remember, and like how all those things go.
Oh, yeah.
All the different things. And then by the end of it, you have a wrapped pole, if you will, that's beautiful. And I feel like that's the way you threaded all the things. I mean, even a character like Shankman, who is not particularly a savory character, right? And it took a lot to sort of get you to come. I feel like finally at the end, we sort of can empathize a lot more. And there's almost this like sort of sadness and, I don't know, almost not nostalgia, but it's like this melancholy feeling we have towards him. It's like opportunities lost, right? Like what did he miss out on? So it's even, you could, and even a character like that whose behavior at sometimes is not the best can be redeemed in the overall sort of beautiful end product. That was a ramble, but go with me.
No, I'm with you. Shankman for me was the character where I'd be sitting back and shaking my head going, oh, Shankman, get out of your own way, do better. You're better than this. You can do better than this. But he couldn't. Mm-hmm. And to me, he's actually a pretty tragic character because, he's it's not a spoiler to say, basically, he's not a good dad. Mm-hmm. And he's not a good dad, paradoxically, because he loves his son and he wants the best for his son, but his idea of what's the best and his own insecurities don't allow him to meet his son where he is. Mm-hmm. And also, his son, Waldo, is a very special boy. And, specialness is not always rewarded in middle school. And who would really want to go back to middle school given the opportunity? I mean, I know I wouldn't.
That's actually what the middle school head of my kids' school, we had a pre-fifth grade parents seminar, and he had all of us raise our hands and say, okay, who would actually go back to middle school right now? And no one raised their hand. A couple of people raised their hand.
Yeah. I did that in front of a big audience at the Miami Book Fair a couple of weeks ago. And I asked the same question. I was interviewing Paulina Poroskova, and she was talking about the misery of being 6 feet tall in middle school. And I asked, like a couple hundred people, how many of you would go back? And one person in the front row raised her hand, and that was it. So Waldo is, Shankman wants Waldo to have an easy life, and Shankman's idea of what that would look like is be quote unquote normal, do quote unquote normal things. Waldo wants to stare at the cosmos and Shankman wants him to play Little League. It's like that. And he's not able to see the uniqueness and the brilliance of his son. And so he really, really messes up. But the thing is, and the thing that makes him tragic is he knows he's messing up. He knows. He's buying books on anger management. He's trying. He knows his wife, Alice, is unhappy and disappointed in him and drinking too much Chardonnay. And he knows, and yet he can't get out of his own way. And in the end, he really does feel like he messed up the one thing I think we can all agree we most don't want to mess up if we're parents, which is he wasn't a good dad. And so that's tragic. But I did have such compassion for him because it's like he came from someone who was like that who came from someone who was like that, and he couldn't break the cycle.
I mean, I think it represents that we all have something about ourselves that we wish we didn't have. And he is like the representative of that you'd like this little piece of you to change, but sometimes it's just part of the package, like no matter what you do. So I don't know. I feel like he represents something like that as well. I really loved the character of Sarah Wilf, who is also struggling. I mean, they're all struggling in their own ways with so many different things and identity. And I mean, that's why it's so interesting. But I just wanted to read this paragraph from her point of view, if that's okay. She's describing a New Year's Eve party like it's 1999. You said, it's a cozy domestic scene, the pretty table, the husband back from the market, the twins, their fingers stained pink and blue. She observes it from a few angles, a wide shot, a slow pan. It is she herself, Sarah Wilf, who is missing. She's here, sure, but some essential part of her is not fully present. This has been true of her for so long that she hardly even notices anymore, and certainly no one else would notice. She looks the part, she knows that. She has always looked the part. She is tiny, delicate, very pretty. She thinks this with zero vanity. It's just a fact. She inherited her mother's striking coloring, eyes that change with the light, sometimes green, sometimes amber, a long tangle of dark curls, a heart-shaped face, an innate composure. It all adds up. The degree from the right school, the string of jobs, each more excellent than the last. No one would know that she is only, ever, a few steps away from the abyss. I love that.
Thanks for reading that. I haven't heard that read aloud. I mean, yeah, that's Sarah. And it's so many of us. I mean, there's pieces of that in so many women I know, myself included. I mean, I think, there's the old adage, write what you know. This is not an autobiographical novel, but I also think it's not a novel I could have written any sooner in my life, even though I tried, because there's that feeling of understanding that, people's shiny exteriors often don't tell the whole story. In fact, never tell the whole story ever. I think we could probably, just say that. And one of the things that literature gets to do in a very direct way is access the interior life in that way, is access the, we can see what those party guests might see when they look at Sarah Wilf. And we can also have direct access to her own monologue, the things going on in her mind that are private and secret, only to her.
Well, I thought it was really a beautiful passage because, you're right, we never know what's going on. And also that time of life is so hard, the juggling and how much is going on. And it's not always the most personally rewarding when you're a caretaker nonstop, but there's so many caretakers in your book who deal with it in different ways too. I mean, Benjamin Welf with Mimi is also becomes a huge caretaker, and he has a very different approach. I'm just going to read one more paragraph, and then I promise I'm done. So this is from Benjamin's point of view a little bit later, and he says, his bride, his wife, his life, she slipped away slowly. Parts of Mimi remained present for so long that it had been possible to have minutes, even hours of pleasure together. Her smell, fresh, milky, a hint of the oil, the immortelle flower, she spread over her face each morning. She had always hummed while cooking, gardening, showering, walking, and she still hummed, though now the tunes had changed. It took Ben a while to realize what was different, and when he did, it was with a sharp pang. These were now childhood melodies. She was careening backward in time. Mimi nestled her head into his shoulder whenever he visited her. She spread her crocheted blanket across their laps as they sat on a sofa in the vast living room of Avalon Hills, tucked them in as if they were companions on a long ski lift ride, keeping warm, dangling high above the mountains. Oh, it's another, just so beautiful. So beautiful. Trying to keep hold of her, not let her fall. It's just, I don't know, all these different ways that they love and take care for other people, and despite what's going on with them.
Thank you I love hearing that. I mean, I think, to go back to the whole idea of time and the way that, sort of time marched on at those 15 years when those characters were basically asleep in the drawer, waiting for me to find them again. And in those years, and this was already a preoccupation of mine, I was thinking about the way when we're beginning our families and the choices that we make to move to a particular neighborhood, to send our kids to a particular school, to live in a particular district, in a particular town, to live in the city, to live in the suburbs, to live in the country, that we are entering into a world with other people, the parents, the parents that you just described in the fifth grade, sort of opening, sort of school opening, the communities that we're in, the synagogues, the community centers, the Ys, and just the neighborhoods themselves. And often we don't really necessarily have that much in common with the people that we've basically moved to this place at the same time as, had kids around the same ages. And yet it's just this extraordinarily potent, vivid chapter in a life. It's such a potent and vivid chapter that when we're in it, we don't have a sense that it's a chapter. Mm-hmm. That there were all these chapters before, And there will be chapters, God willing, after, and that those chapters actually add up to more time and more life than the, X number of years of active parenting, child rearing, being in the absolute thick of that. What's the expression that, the days are long and the years are short. So the days are long, day after day after day, and it can feel like this is all of life. And so with Ben and Mimi, I was really interested in what their lives were like after their kids were grown, after their kids moved to far-flung parts of the world. And they remained in Avalon for a variety of reasons. Ben's a doctor there. He worked at the hospital. Mostly they were really just entrenched. They couldn't imagine a life somewhere else. And so they stay in their house on this street while the other houses turn over and the Schenkmans move in and the neighborhood changes and, fancier cars start replacing older cars and gym additions get built and kids don't play in the streets anymore. They get carted around by nannies or their parents to their various lessons. And there's just the sense that there is this passage of time, and this place and the trees and the stars are unchanged, but the humanity that's moving in and out of this place is ever evolving. And so that passage that you read of Ben and Mimi, on their metaphorical ski lift is that. I mean, they are living a much later chapter in their lives, and yet they're still in the place where they were young parents, where they first moved in as hopeful, just starting out, couple moving to Avalon from the city, and all of these different phases along the way. And they're all rich, and they're all in their own way beautiful. And I think I wanted to try to get at that, that even in their frailty and even in the loss that is inherent in what's happening in their marriage at that point in the book, it's come out of this great commitment and love for each other.
I love that. As you know, I have 4 kids, but my youngest is now 8. So I feel like I'm out of the woods. I just wrote this essay that says, like, confession, I'm glad I don't have small children anymore. Like, can I even say that? But it's so hard. Like even just having an 8-year-old is the youngest, is like life-changing. And you're like, oh, wow. Okay. So now here I am. So I don't know. I constantly am thinking about the passage of time and how it seemed like forever, and then it's not there anymore at all, right?
Yes.
No more diaper bags and all of that. So I'm just wondering, because towards the end of the book, and as you said before, the view of sort of the universe is containing sort of like all and nothing at the same time, and this where we all fit in as people. Like, what is and you don't have to answer this, but I'm wondering what your view is of what happens like after death. And I know you're Jewish, and you include Yom Kippur references, and Inheritance was a lot about your background and your Judaism and all of that. But I'm just curious and what your thoughts are.
My thoughts continue to evolve and to obsess me. I've been thinking about this probably all my life. Because I was raised Orthodox, and that was one set of beliefs, and not beliefs that I really ever adhered to, but they were my family's, and they were, that's sort of like the music of my childhood in a way, or it was the landscape of my childhood very much was orthodoxy and going to shul with my dad. And then I kind of left all that very much in the dust and really thought, well, if it's all or nothing, then it's going to have to be nothing. I can't do all. And I wrote a memoir called Devotion that's very much about, my son, probably around the same age as your youngest, asked me what I believed. And it sent me into a total existential crisis, because I didn't know how to answer that question. I didn't know. I hadn't thought about what I believed in a very long time. And I felt like I owed it to him to live inside those questions. And so I wrote that's what I do when I want to live inside some questions is I write a book. So I wrote Devotion. And one of the things that happened as a result of writing Devotion is it was really a life-changing book for me. And I don't mean the publication. I mean the realization that we are all more alike than we are different. It cured me in some strange mystical way of my fear of public speaking, because I would look out, which is a good thing because I've had to do a lot of it. I would look out at an audience and just think, you all have the same preoccupations and fears and secret shames and desires and concerns and anxieties as I do. We all do. And we just don't talk about them. You know, it's not social chit chat. But understanding that in drilling into the specificity of my own history, I really thought when I was writing Devotion that I was writing a book that no one would read because it was so idiosyncratically me. You know, you'd have to be raised Orthodox, and I didn't know the half of it,
Right.
but raised Orthodox and an only child and older parents, and my father died young, and my son was sick. Like all this mishmash of my life. I felt like you'd have to pretty much have that exact overlay to identify with that book. And I thought, well, that's okay. I've written a book no one will read. All right. And then the book came out, and I started getting piles and piles of mail from people who were Jewish and Christian and Catholic and Muslim and raised fundamentalist and raised atheist and old and young and men and women and all over the world. And I thought, oh, first of all, it was a reminder that the specific really is what's universal. But also I thought, oh, this really is this yearning. I remember going and speaking to a conference of female rabbis. It was a national conference of female rabbis. I believe they were Reform rabbis. And there were, I don't know, like 75 of them. And what I came away from that day with was, oh, the rabbis don't have the answers either. They have to act like they have the answers because that's their job. But in fact, they're yearning too. And what is this yearning? And I was on stage with a wonderful rabbi, Laura Geller, in Beverly Hills during that period of time. And Laura Geller actually said in front of hundreds of people, the God of our childhoods fails us. And it just went through me. And I thought, I couldn't believe that as a rabbi that she could say that. And what I saw on the faces of all the people in the congregation was relief, not horror, not like, oh my God, no, you can't tell me that. You've got to tell me that, like, God's a man with a big beard in the sky and he's getting us parking spaces or whatever. Just the sense that there is mystery that we don't know. And yet, I guess what I would say is, and I am rambling, but in Signal Fires, Waldo, I said earlier, he's the heart of it for me. He's the voice of that. And in some way or another, I think he embodies something of what I have come to believe, which is that it's all connected. And if we can live in that way, or I'll speak for myself. I mean, if I can live in that way, when I am living in that way, I am at my best. I am at my most connected to myself, to the world around me, to those who I love, to the strangers passing me on the street. That feeling of like, well, you use the beautiful metaphor of the maypole, but maybe like this giant cosmic maypole, or the invisible threads is the way that like Ralph Waldo Emerson would have described it. That it's like a tapestry that connects all of us. And when I can feel that, I feel that I'm at my most spiritual, which is maybe a tenth of the time, but it's the goal.
My son, my 8-year-old, again was like asking me the meaning of life the other night. And I was like, well, everybody has to decide that for themselves. But I feel like ultimately it is the meaning. The point is, he was like, what's the point of it all? And I was like, I think the point of it is to love, right? Like that's the only thing we can all do and like make the world better for everyone else. But I don't know. I think anybody who purports to know and with such authority it raises questions as well. I mean, how can anyone actually know when we haven't been there. But anyway, I want to know, what is your next project that we can look forward to, aside, I'm assuming, from the continuation of Family Secrets, which you're like a #1 podcaster in the world, in case people didn't know that as well. But aside from that and your movie and whatever, so what else? What can we look forward to?
So what I am embarking on, or I already did embark, but I'm returning to embarking on right now that I'm coming to the end of the tour for Signal Fires, is writing the TV pilot. So it's in development as a TV show, as a series, as a dramatic series. And I am writing the pilot, which is, it's not something I've ever done. Creating the podcast gave me a real sense of liberation about, or permission to try things that I haven't done before. When I started the podcast, I didn't make a big study of podcasting, and I had no idea how to create a podcast. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you mean.
And learning that this different form of storytelling was something that resonated, something that I love doing. It's completely different from writing fiction or writing memoir. So I'm approaching the series and writing the pilot with that spirit of just, wow, I get to try something at this point in my career that I haven't done before. And I also get to continue living with these characters, because in order to write a TV series, I have to imagine, there's a lot of space in Signal Fires. There's a lot of years where we don't know what we move across decades, and whatever happened in those decades doesn't appear in the book. Well, I get to decide now where I want to take them and where I want to go with them, while retaining the integrity and the magic of the novel itself and of who these characters are to each other. But I can expand it out, and so I'm not losing them yet. They still belong to me, and that's when you finish a novel and you launch it into the world, the characters stop being yours. And for me, when a reader has an opinion about Schenkman or has an opinion about Waldo, I love it. I don't say like, you're wrong. I love hearing people, argue about my characters, or, it's why book clubs are so fantastic. And I really feel like they are now in the reader's hands, not my hands, except that I still get to hold on to them in this way for a little while longer.
Was it you who posted today, or somebody else, the Joan Didion quote about how first you get to know your characters and then you never want to see them go? It's on Instagram today.
That's funny. No, it wasn't me. But
someone I follow, that was like my first thing that popped up today. I'll have to find it and send it to you.
And Zibby, I just want to thank you so much. That was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I always love talking to you.
I love talking to you too. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.